Hey, it's Jeff Hyman with Startup Therapist, where we focus on the people part of startups, and today a very specific type of people, and that is the media. So with me is Josh Inglis. Hey, Josh.
Hey, how are you, Jeff?
Fantastic. Josh runs one of the premier public relations firms for early stage companies and startups. That's the biggest part of his business. The firm is called Propllr. We'll talk a lot about that in a few minutes. But let me tell you a bit about Josh, and then I'll tell you that we're going to focus on what early stage companies need to be doing to get and maximize media exposure and media coverage, which is so instrumental to building a new brand, right, Josh?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Great. Josh, you got 20 years experience in PR. I think you started Propllr, 4 years ago?
About 4.5 years ago now, yep.
And the firm
Well, 4 years. It was 4 years in August, so it feels like 4.5, maybe four and a couple.
Firm is based in Chicago, but you do work nationally.
Absolutely, and in fact, we've had clients as far afield as Berlin and Stockholm.
Great. Okay.
Through referrals.
So
we haven't pounded the pavement there, but
you're certainly qualified to talk about PR for startups. So let's start with the obvious question. A lot of founders and entrepreneurs ask me if PR is important. Should they be spending their time on it? Many of them think that PR is getting articles in newspapers, or what used to be newspapers. Now it might be websites. What the heck is PR in the context of a startup, and is it important for them, and why?
Yeah, so the two main value propositions for public relations are building credibility and awareness. And that's every early company needs credibility and awareness. Advertising can certainly get you awareness. It can't get you credibility. And so that's ultimately what PR is all about, those two things. There are people, in terms of hiring a firm or not hiring a firm, there are very well-known people, Mark Cuban being one of them, who says it's ridiculous for startups to hire PR firms. But what he's not saying is it's ridiculous to do PR.
Yeah.
He's saying that you should do it on your own. And it is a DIY thing if you have, and I might refer a few times to blog posts. Like whenever there are certain topics that seem to come up a lot, I like to write a blog post about them. One of them is, should I hire a PR firm or not?
And in a few minutes, I want to talk about the difference between doing it on your own and hiring a firm, or how to know when you're ready to hire a firm.
Right.
But before we get to that, talk a little about, so you said it's important for brand awareness and brand credibility.
Mm-hmm.
It gets you on the radar, and it gets you established as a leader or a credible company in your space. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Less effective, in my experience, and I'm interested in whether you agree, in actually driving sales. So sometimes you'll see a bump if you have a big article or a big interview or something, but it's not a terribly predictable mechanism, and therefore it's not great for driving sales. Is that safe to say?
There are times when it's like, wow, that turned into something great, where I think where the credibility really comes in. I'll use an anecdote. I ran public relations from an agency side for a company called Options Express. Options Express was an online broker. I started working with them in their first year. It was almost 8 years total working together. During that time, they went public. They eventually sold to Schwab for $1 billion. We didn't use the term unicorn back then, but I guess they would have been one. And what I think was very beneficial for them is there very likely were articles that we helped them get that led to new accounts. But the reason they put PR on their pre-IPO roadshow slide about how they got accounts at such a low price, they put PR on there. And the reason was it helped with conversion.
So if I'm an early stage company and I've got my sales pipeline, whether it's a consumer business or a B2B company,
sure,
I've got leads, and what you're saying is PR, as a result of the credibility that it bestows upon the startup, can increase conversion rates. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. So for the Options Express example, they were number one. They were the number one ranked online broker in Barron's 4 years in a row. After their second full year of business, they beat Ameritrade. They beat E-Trade. And so if you're trying to convince somebody, hey, wire in $20,000 and open up your account, or $2,000 or $50,000, it's hard to do that if they've never heard of you.
Right.
Now, maybe they haven't heard of you, but when they come to your site, they see, oh, number one in Barron's. I feel good about this.
Right.
And so that's it's giving people that comfort that, hey, I'm making the right decision. And that's on the consumer side. On the B2B side, it's similar in that there's that old saying, no one ever got fired for hiring IBM. I don't know if that's true anymore.
Yeah, it's changed.
But there is that saying, and it's a similar kind of idea. So someone's been tasked with going out and finding a new technology for their company, and they're bringing, hey, this is my recommendation for our CRM, or this is our recommendation for some sort of supply chain management software. These guys, here's who I recommend. And then if that company if that person knows that they're sharing a company that has had a lot of coverage, and they can be, here they are in Business Week, and here they are in TechCrunch, and here they are in CIO, then that all of a sudden becomes an easier pitch than that's like the credible one versus one that maybe doesn't have any public attention that way.
Obviously, the more the better. But how do you know when you've arrived at that, again, early stage company? How do you know when you can actually say, oh, we've hit the radar in terms of awareness, or wow, now we've got some credibility? How do I know when I've hit that tipping point? Obviously, I want more and more, but what's the metric that you can look at?
It's a good question. I don't know that there is one thing in particular. I think when we talk to clients a lot, everyone always wants to know, especially in the startup world, because everything's electronic now. AdWords, everything is, you can track ROI of so many different marketing activities, whether it's email or AdWords and so on. It's still very difficult to do on public relations. There's a lot of talk about it.
Yep.
I think there's some creative ideas that are out there. But ultimately, especially for an earlier stage company, this isn't like a Series C pre-IPO company with $50,000 a month.
Yeah.
But if you have a couple thousand or a few thousand or several $1,000s, it's very difficult to measure impact of PR. So what we tell our clients to do is try to measure it, try to source it or find some anecdotal evidence of its success. So if you contribute an article to a trade publication, say you're B2B, and you contribute an article to your trade publication, say healthcare, if you're talking about a specific topic related to maybe a product that you sell, maybe instead of just having a link to your site, you can link to that product, or you can link to a landing page.
Got it.
From that contributed article.
To try to drive actual conversions.
It's a unique link. The only way people ever could have come here was from that article.
So
that's like an anecdotal way to do it.
Got it.
So there are a variety of things like that to measure the impact and to track, and obviously ask people where they heard about you. Don't give them just one answer. Let them choose several.
Yep.
Because obviously, over time, these things tend to build on themselves. And then the other thing, though, is we say it's not enough just to measure it. It's also you got to maximize it. So many companies, they get a great placement, and they never do anything with it. Maybe they put it on their website.
So what can you do? What can you do to merchandise it or magnify the effect of it, other than just putting it on your website? What would be some examples?
Yeah, well, and I've seen people who don't even do that. But so let's not forget that one. But that's certainly a big part. You can get really creative with it. So a lot of times articles are what are called evergreen. It's not necessarily about news of your company, like funding or a new product. It might be an article you contributed. It might be a profile of the company that's sort of all-encompassing and has some legs from a time perspective. There's no reason, if you're on social media, not to tweet that or post that once a week until it's just ridiculous to keep posting it. You'll know what ridiculous is.
Right.
So that would certainly be one. Don't just do it once and hope somebody saw it. Make it something like, make it part of your inventory. Use it as an excuse to reach out to customers or prospects.
That's a great one.
We talked to you last week or a month ago or 2 months ago about X. Well, here's an article I just wrote on that subject. I thought you'd find it interesting. I'd love to talk to you some more. It's just another excuse to reach out. And then there are really small things you can do, like put it in your email signature, or link to your media page in your email signature.
Right.
There are really lots and lots of different ways you can do it.
But you really want to magnify.
They get the placement and then forget all about it.
You want to magnify the effect of it. So the founder or the CEO, the entrepreneur, gets the call, and it's CNBC or CNN or New York Times. It's the big league, right? Top 10, whoever those are these days. Huffington Post, maybe. They get one chance, right? They could totally screw it up, and P.S., if CNN covers you, they're not going to cover you again anytime soon.
Yeah.
So what are the things that entrepreneur or founder needs to be doing or thinking or preparing to get the most out of that opportunity?
There are a variety of tactical things to sort of you could dive away into, like media training and all that. But I think we probably don't want this conversation to be a media training discussion. But I think one of the main things you could talk about is think of what you want that headline to be. So, for example, even if they're just interviewing you for another piece and they just want your expertise, you should still think about like what your headline is. And by going back to that in your head and finding ways to bring the answers back to that, you're going to have a much better result than if you just let the conversation go wherever the reporter wants it to go.
So to be clear, are you saying that I, as the entrepreneur, should be thinking about the key message or messages that I want to convey, or am I thinking about it from the point of view of the writer or editor or reporter and trying to help them come up with something interesting to the viewer or reader? What lens am I using?
Yeah, it's a mix of that, but the main audience to think about is not you and not the reporter, but instead the reader, who's your customer.
Got it.
So you want to be presenting everything within a context of what they should care about. There's a media trainer that I've worked with in the past named Terry Gowdy, and she had this great video that she would show at the start of every session, and it was from the Chicago Bulls. I think it was their 4th championship rally at Grant Park. Dennis Rodman gets up, and he says, "They can't hold me back. You know, I am who I am." He's talking about himself.
Yeah.
Scottie Pippen gets up and he talks about the Band of Brothers or whatever, and they're talking about us.
Yeah.
Only Michael Jordan, the smart one that everybody loves, got up and said, "We did this so you could be proud when you walk down the airport with your Bulls hat on."
Wow.
So that's kind of the perspective you want to bring.
Yeah.
Is think of what your audience cares about and speak to them. In terms of the engaging thing for a reporter,
yeah.
If they're already interested, they're already engaged, so you can stay with it. I don't think you have to worry about convincing them during the interview.
Right.
And as long as you're answering from what your customers care about. So like for a sports fan, the pain is I'm embarrassed that I'm a Bears fan right now because they're so horrible.
Yeah.
Or the benefit to the fan is I'm proud as heck to be from Chicago because the Bulls always win. I happen to be a Buckeye fan. It's a good time for me.
So the point is
I know how it makes me feel as a sports fan.
So thinking about it from the point of view of the reader or audience, as opposed to you or even the reporter.
Absolutely. And the reporter should be writing for that audience, and you should be speaking to that. It should be a natural thing.
Yeah.
But it's helpful to think about it and to remind yourself.
Okay, so let's say we get the piece. Front page of the New York Times business section.
Yep.
2 minutes on CNBC, whatever. The piece you dream of.
Yeah.
And they butcher us. They get my name right, they get the company right, but they hate it, they slam us, they say we're not as good as our competitor. What do I do?
Yeah.
Do I still merchandise it? I can't take it back. Do I try to correct it? Do I write a letter to the editor? Do I just move on? What do I do?
So I guess what I would say, it depends on. I've heard that from clients before, or from people who have been through the experience, and they felt like, "Oh, this was horrible." No one will read it as closely as you do. So there might be something. There's certain publications where it'll be sort of the main pitch about the company they're writing about, and it's very positive. But no publication is in business to write your brochure. So for many of them, they're doing their job by saying, "Hey, this is the positive that they're saying, but here's some potential roadblocks."
Yeah.
Or they say this is their huge growth opportunity, but these people are skeptical about it. That's just them doing their job.
Right.
That's not like a hatchet piece or anything like that. But sometimes, because the entrepreneur reads that so much more closely than anybody else does, it's easy to take it personally. So in almost every case, I would say yes, use it. If there is something that you think is particularly egregious, or I was talking to one client, and one company, and I don't want to give away too much, so I'm going to see if I can do this without explaining their business. But they got an article in a trade publication, a dream trade publication, great one for them, read by everybody, and the guy expressed skepticism. No, he expressed it in the upfront portion. It was a reasonable skepticism. I think they have, and I talked to them about sort of a different way to address it. So instead of saying, yes, but we're growing and we're addressing that, just say, yes, exactly. What you're expressing as skepticism is actually the point of what we're sort of doing a little jujitsu on it. And then, so I would encourage them to use that article. You might be able to create blog content out of it and say, hey, this article ran and we just want to address some of the issues. You can make it social media content. And so you're addressing the skepticism, but you're also getting that article out there so that people see this big trade publication wrote that.
Got it.
So with rare, like if someone writes something about how your employees like ran somebody over, no, of course you don't share that.
Right.
But if it's something where a reporter shared some healthy skepticism,
then it's
or even
fine.
maybe what you felt was unreasonable, put it out there, address it, and move on. Like I think it could still be very, very valuable.
Can you think of a company or name a company that's not a client of yours that you think just does a great job with PR? Could be small, large, preferably on the smaller side. And what are they doing, do you think, as an expert, when you look at it, that's working so well?
Yeah. It's tempting just to go for like the Apples and things like that.
But how about a smaller company that where PR makes it seem a little larger than life?
Can I come back to that
We'll come back to it.
I don't want to sit here for a minute thinking.
No problem. Let's talk about timing. So how do I know when, as a founder or entrepreneur, I'm ready to spend any time on PR? Yeah. How do I know when it's time to bring someone in-house, maybe full-time?
Yep.
And then how do I know when it's time to hire a firm? How do I kind of think about those?
Well, that's actually, I mentioned earlier we do like blogs when we get certain questions, and that's certainly one of them. When we're talking to companies, and this was something I've sort of learned over the 4.5 years or so of Propllr, if a early stage company comes to us and PR is the only thing that they're doing to get attention, other than maybe like a launch or a funding announcement, but if they're looking at PR as like, this is going to be how we market ourselves, I counsel against that. I would rather have them, instead of spending the money on PR, I say, look, there's some things you can do on your own, and I'll help you figure that out. Plus, instead of paying 4 or 5 or 6 or however much a month, hire a couple kids to work the phones to get you some customers. Right. Build up that group of 100 customers that everybody needs to get started with.
Yep.
But so, as it relates to hiring a firm or not, so Mark Cuban and Eric Ries from Basecamp, like they say, don't hire PR, do it yourself. They still value PR, but they say do it yourself. But not everyone is Mark Cuban or Eric Ries. Right. So really, I feel like there are 4 main reasons. My blog post says 3, but one of them is really 2, and I haven't gone back to change it yet. There are really 4 main reasons to hire a PR firm or not. One is communication skills. Mm-hmm. PR firms are generally good communicators. Yep. They write well, they pitch well, they're able to get a point across effectively. Not every startup founder is. They might be a finance-oriented person, they might be an engineer, someone from a legal background, whatever. Not everyone's a really good communicator.
So you got to have someone that can tell the story.
Exactly. Okay. Creativity is another. Mm-hmm. A lot of companies, you might have news, you launch your product, you raise funding. What happens in all that in-between time? Right. How do you get coverage when there's no news?
So consistently coming up with new angles, new takes on the story.
Exactly. Okay. And so a PR firm should be paying attention to what's happening in the world. Yep. So football season just started. Maybe there's a way you can tie into that.
Or back to school or other seasonality. Football.
Yeah, so maybe your company does data analytics, and you can tie that into fantasy football, and you can make it like tie fantasy football to retail analytics that your startup does, and find a way to match those. So hopefully a PR firm is creative. The third one is acceleration. PR firms know a lot of reporters, although it's, I think, less of a relationship business now than it used to be. Yep. So we know a lot of reporters, but we also know the process. We know how to pitch. We know how to follow up. Yeah. We know what it takes to get from point A to point C.
And there is an art, or there is a science to that, because I assume the reporters expect a certain type of follow-up and frequency, and if you violate those rules, you probably look kind of amateurish, I would think.
Yeah. And so I think the mix of relationships and understanding the logistics and the process, that can also speed up everything. Yep. But the fourth one is purely time. It's an outsourced function. I don't have a license. I don't have a graduate degree. I don't have, I don't do continuing education. Yep. So it's not rocket science, whereas my old boss used to say it's not rocket surgery. Yeah. So it is largely a function of time. And most startup founders don't have it. Yep. And so that's where we come in. Now, some people decide to hire internally, and that can work very well. The risk there, and we've seen this a lot, is you hire someone to do your PR, but then they're the only good writers, so now they're writing for your website. Got it. They're also planning customer events. Yeah. They're doing your emails. They're doing everything.
So you need to protect that time, because it really is a full-time endeavor.
Absolutely. I think it very much is. And also, it's a relationship. Another blog post we have. It's a relationship. You should not only be going to reporters when you have something you want them. So PR is a sales job.
Yep.
It requires strong relationships, and strong relationships don't come from me every time I knock on the door. I'm trying to sell you something.
Yep.
I should be providing things.
Story ideas. How can I be a source for your next story? Things like that.
Exactly. Like I bring all the time. I'll bring reporters, people who are not even my clients.
Yeah.
I'll just say, hey, I read your article. You got to talk to these guys.
Got it.
They're not my clients.
Got it.
I'm happy to put you in touch.
You're a connector, right? You're introducing people.
I'm the guy who at a party, if I meet someone who's from Pittsburgh and I know my friend Dave is from Pittsburgh, I'll put them together and walk away. Like
Got it.
That's what I enjoy doing.
And that's what writers and editors need, because they need it. They got to feed the beast, especially now that the beast is the internet with an infinite, load of or ability to publish. They just need story ideas and connections and people.
Yep.
Well, so you mentioned your blog a few times. How can people get to your blog and follow you, and then how can they get in touch if they want to learn more about Propllr or even your opinion on whether they're ready for PR?
Well, yeah, so a variety of ways. Anyone can get in touch with me at any time. There's a little form on the site, but please email me. It's josh@propllr.com, Propllr.com. No E's. Couldn't afford them when I started. The blog is very easy to find. I think it's just the tab is blog, but we call it Onward Upward, kind of a Propllr play.
Got it.
There's lots of content in there. Not as much as there probably should be, but you know what they say about the cobbler's kids.
Yeah, sure. Of course.
Content for other people.
Of course.
But I'm happy to. I love doing it. Like I work with VCs. I work with startup accelerators. I'm a mentor at South by Southwest, 1871. I just love doing it. I love anyone who wants to call or send me an email.
Great.
And sort of do like a office hours kind of thing. Like, hey, I'm struggling with this or that. I would love to help.
Great. Well, Josh of Propllr PR, we really appreciate it, and thank you so much for your insights.
I can't believe we're over already.
Yeah.
That was great. I enjoyed it.